Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm so pleased to be joined by Kirstin Chalmers, the hair and makeup designer and co-prosthetics designer for Scoop, and Christian Mallett, the prosthetics designer for Scoop, the new Netflix film, which you can watch right now about the Prince Andrew BBC Newsnight interview. We were talking just briefly before this, Kirstin, before we started. It's a great film, and Rufus Sewell plays Prince Andrew and looks nothing like Prince Andrew. So I guess, like, just to start, when you're approached for a project like this, and you kind of like, yeah, where do you start? What are your thoughts when you first get approached to take this on?
When Philip gave me the call to do the job, and we were figuring out, or he was figuring out who he'd like to have to play Prince Andrew, and then he said Rufus, and I was like, okay, they are very different. They look very different in every aspect of their physiology. So we started to just play with Philip started to play with photographs of morphing the two together and just going, well, his face is much longer, Andrew's face is much longer, and Rufus's face is much broader, and Rufus has an amazing chiseled chin and Andrew doesn't. And so it's like, well, how can we keep the essence of Rufus and get the essence of Prince Andrew? So I was then right, well, I have to have somebody like, I have to have Kristyan on board because he's the man to help me do these things. And we sort of all worked together very closely to going, well, what will work, what won't. And Kristyan got started sculpting because we managed to get a 3D scan of Rufus in LA, and that was sent over to the UK to Kristyan. And we just looked at it and he made all the pieces, and then he decided, well, I think this could work or that could work, these pieces, that pieces. And then we had the luxury of doing a couple of tests, which worked very, very well. But we both felt that it wasn't quite right because it was just the weight ratio was slightly wrong. Like, Kristyan, you want to jump in and say what you think here?
Yeah, so, I mean, basically, it's always a negotiation, essentially trying to get as little prosthetics as we can on the actor with getting the look of the character that we want to do. So when I was sculpting it, I pretty much had lots of references of Prince Andrew around me. Obviously, I had the luxury of having my laptop there, but actually had the Prince Andrew interview on loop. So I had that constantly on the go, so I could work out what we're trying to catch.
That constantly.
Yeah, it's quite sickening, really. But watching that whilst trying to sculpt and just trying to get the essence of the character, and ultimately I just sculpted as much as I could to get as close as I could to Prince Andrew, knowing that what we're likely to do is we're likely to take away when we do our tests. We're likely to go, oh, this, we don't need this, we don't need that, but we'll go all in first.
And then I suppose the physiology, the way that Rufus's face moves is different to the way that Prince Andrew's face moves. So, like, well, that bit works, like the nose and the forehead and everything worked beautifully. But when we put teeth in, the top teeth didn't work at all. So the bottom teeth did. So it was just like, oh, that's when you started to change the balance of where the weight of the pieces were, I think.
Yeah, and we had this weight going on around here in the sculpt, and it looked okay. And we put it on Rufus, and Rufus does like to pull his neck back and actually do quite a lot of the acting of that himself. And of course, when he does that, his own skin behaves a certain way. And so we knew that we actually had to reduce the weight here, just because we knew that he was going to be doing this a lot and putting some of that back in for us. So that basically meant that after the first test, we then resculpted it and sort of slimmed him down here to give us essentially the accents that we wanted in the movement.
And when we got that, when we figured out that bit and that was all perfect, then I was looking at his eyebrows and going, hang on, his eyebrows are too dark and they are very arched, and Prince Andrew's goes down and they're much more ginger. So had to bleach them up and then add in more to just sort of change the shape of his face that way. And then once the ball cap and everything was on, and then you put on the hair and make that's all exactly in the right shape, the whole thing starts to come together. And yeah,
does it help when the actor? Yeah, does it help? Like, I mean, it sounds like Rufus was very game for all this. Does that? I'm sure that helps, right? To have an actor who's like kind of into this and like wants to do the transformation like this.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
he was amazing in the chair. You know, he
yeah.
absolutely loved it.
It's great.
Also, you know, he's worked very hard preparing for his role, and it's our job to just enhance that for him, and so that he feels 100% comfortable when he gets out of the chair, and he's just like, I am the character. You know, that's who I am. I don't need to think about this anymore. He can just think about his part. And then that means that the character is believable, and then the audience, I don't think, are looking so much for the prosthetics or where the wig is or anything like that. They're just like, oh my God, it's got the essence of the man, and that's the job done.
Yeah. I mean, watching it, I would say just as a viewer, I was like, you don't even, you know, it's like, you know, I never even thought of it as like, it looks so like legitimate on him. I was just like, wow, Rufus Sewell really does. I guess I know in real life he doesn't look like him, but he really does here. So I guess maybe he does, you know, like you really kind of get your mind tricked because it's such a great, just looks so right. You both mentioned like how you're watching the interview, and obviously that is such a large part of this film, and like the recreation is amazing. But I was wondering, like, are you mad? Like, did you have to think about like when he's not in the interview? Did you think about that differently and how he would look differently without like the TV makeup on that we see in the interview? I guess, and did that factor in at all?
Only for the silhouette, really. Essentially, you want to get like a 3/4 so that when he's static and he's just moving around, we lock that in. So there are moments, even when he was on set, you would catch a glimpse of him and you'd fool yourself.
Yeah.
And so we knew that was our main goal was predominantly that, but we knew that when we're going to get all the feature and all the real direct comparison, because everyone in the audience, they've probably seen the real interview. And if you used to watch that and you used to watch Scoop, you would really see that Prince Andrew, he does so much weird facial expressions in that interview, and his face is so animated. It's quite extraordinary. And so we had to play for that as well as essentially him just walking around. So again, it's that negotiation of getting what we can with the actor. But to be honest, that's Rufus that does that. We do this and we make it look like him, and really he does the rest. And he was phenomenal. He really was.
Yeah. And with terms of like getting the performance too, I guess like how like you were mentioning, like you want him to come out of the chair feeling like he is this character, right? So I guess like how do you have to like make sure? I guess is it like not having too much makeup, or is it like so it feels like a second skin? I guess like how do you kind of do that so it's like not like I'd imagine if it's too much, it kind of could be distracting for the actor, right? Or whatever.
If there's too much makeup and too much prosthetics, you suddenly just see a face of rubber or a face of plastic, and then you can't see the face move with underneath it because it becomes a static thing. So when it's done very finely and very perfectly, it is like a second skin. And when the weight of the silicone has been sculpted correctly for the actor's face, then it works with their own musculature, and it becomes this sort of hybrid person, but has all the right elements of the character that you're trying to portray. When it's done extremely well, that's what you get. When it's done badly, all you notice is the prosthetics or the wig or the makeup. You know, when it's done seamlessly, it's invisible. And then people don't believe it because it's like that's another person kind of thing, and you're like going, and so after the first 30 seconds, you're like, I believe this makeup, and so I can now get into the story. But if it was not done well, you'd notice it the whole way through, and it'd drive you crazy.
I think having the benefit of him actually having a couple of makeup tests and getting used to it and being in front of the mirror and rehearsing with it and playing around with cameras and even taking video footage of himself, he was just playing with it and seeing what his limitations could be. Now, I've done makeups before, and I've done a makeup. We haven't had the luxury of a test, and our test is actually the first day of the shoot, and you're locking in whatever you get with. But then the actor doesn't know what the limitations are, and because it does feel tight when it's on your face, they don't want to perform because they're worried that it's going to fall off or it's going to snap or it's going to break. And yeah, it's completely flexible, but if they don't know, it does restrict their ability to perform, and that then carries through. And so we kind of had a bit of a perfect storm where Rufus was brilliant in the chair. He was brilliant at being able to have those test moments to work out what he could do with the prosthetics. And me and Kirstin had the ability to negotiate a couple of times and make tweaks and changes to get it
Yeah.
exactly where we wanted it to be. So it
And
worked
also,
out great.
when I first got the job, I was just talking to Philip and saying, we have to cast this actor as soon as possible in order to have tests, because if we don't, it might just be the downfall of the film. It has to be done so well, and we have to be given, the craft has to be given the space in order to do the best job that you possibly can. It's these kind of makeups you can't do tomorrow. They take time, and they take a lot of very, very tiny little changes and little tweaks, and stand back and think about it and see how everybody feels about it. And without that, it could fall apart, but it didn't. It looks amazing.
He looks amazing. No, he does. He really does. And I was like, even if, I mean, I think he's great in the film, like as an actor, obviously it's a wonderful performance. But if he doesn't, like, if the makeup is not right, I don't think that, like, the performance would not be the same, right? It's got to be, it's like absolutely connected. And he looks just so much like him. And you're right. I think if you people watched, like, obviously this is like the most watched interview, I think, in the history of the BBC, certainly one of the most watched.
You can't mess this one up.
You can't mess it up. And like, I think if people go back and watch it after they watch Scoop, they'll see how it's like almost uncanny how much these two men look exactly the same. Kirstin, you mentioned like working with Philip and stuff. I guess like, why is that such a great collaboration for you? Obviously, I know you worked with him before too. So like,
I've worked with him before on Catherine the Great, but it's just because you know that he wants to pull the best performance out of his actors, and he chooses people that are sensitive to his vision, I guess, because you don't want to overplay it. It has to, and this film was like, we want to get all the elements as accurate as possible, but not to be so not to be dogged about it. You just to make them as real so that all the actors are comfortable, whether it's Gillian, Billy, or Rufus, or Kiwi, or any of them. Just go, right, what are the crucial elements of each character? What are we trying to emulate? How far do we go? Do we use prosthetics on everybody? Is that necessary? And then once we did a load of tests with Billy and with Gillian, we're like, no, we don't need that. Just by changing the hair and putting either heavy TV makeup on, or changing the eye color, or of Gillian, everybody's got wigs on. So the hair was, I know it was integral to each character, and just by doing those changes, you're like, we get the essence of those real people, and the acting does the rest, So it's not otherwise it becomes a slave to the makeup or the craft, and then you notice that, and then you've lost the magic. And Philip, I think, I think he's very astute at deciding what he likes and what he needs, and pushing you in a direction that you want to go, and just going, no, let's pull back on that. We don't need to do that. And I think, or let's go full hell for leather and get it as close as we can on with Rufus, So he's a great guy to work with.
Yeah. Kristyan, in terms of like the prosthetics with Rufus too, I guess, like, was there a part that was the most tricky to get? I mean, you mentioned the neck and stuff, but was there anything else, like, in terms of like trying to figure out?
I mean, when I was told it was Rufus, I'm not going to lie, my throat went really tight. I was worried, because he's so far at the other end of the spectrum in comparison to. It's
a very good looking man.
Exactly, and he's got like a strong jawline. He's chiseled, and it's so. I mean, he is quite covered. I would say 80% of his face is covered. We've got eye bags, we've got forehead, we've got nose, we've got cheeks, we've got full neck that comes all the way around here, and it comes quite high. He's got a full cap, cap on. But I mean, I think the hardest thing that we did try was, he was quite insistent on trying to change his eye shape. And so we did sculpt on the very first test, like these little pieces that sort of just gave a little bit of a hood. And they were okay statically, but obviously when he blinks and he raises his eyes, they then do something quite strange. And so it was like, oh, well, we'll try those again. We'll just try tweaking them. And I think we made 5 different attempts at just trying to get this thing, but we didn't need it. But weirdly, Rufus kind of wanted to give it a go, and we was like, okay, well, we'll see if we can do that as well. But mechanically, it just wouldn't function because it's just how his eye operated when you you know, he opens his eyelid. He just didn't have the skin space in order for anything to sort of hang down and give us the lid detail that we wanted. And it didn't bother me that we didn't use it, but it was quite interesting that all of a sudden that tiny little thing became a detail that we tried to hone in on. But I'm kind of glad that we didn't, because it just freed him up. It freed him up to actually express, and because they were so tight. I mean, I'm kind of glad I didn't know they were going to do close-ups like that when I was making it at the beginning, because if I'd known that, I probably would have taken the job. But they were, they were super tight. And I think if we'd had problems around there, it would have just shown up, and then it would have took you out of the story, and then it failed. So, but yeah, I mean, that was all. Everything else was great.
And the other thing we had to do was you had to do Jeffrey Epstein as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Because in the beginning it was like we were going to just get an actor who looked similar-ish to him, but they couldn't find anyone, and so it was important to get somebody who could act well. And so it was like we have to make a big change on Colin Wells as well, because he doesn't have the same chin, the same shape of head, nothing. So
same length of nose. Everything was quite different on him. And like with Colin playing Jeffrey, I mean, it's kind of all about Jeffrey Epstein, and why Prince Andrew's there is because of him. So that had to be right. Admittedly, we didn't have the luxury of time as we did with Rufus, as we did with Colin, but again, he had like multiple little pieces just to bring him there, and that was all. Again, me and Kirstin sort of negotiating with looking at the sculpt and playing around, moving things further one way and then the other way. Did a test, and actually the first test was like, oh, we don't. I think we changed one thing on that, and I think it was either the top lip or the bottom lip. I can't remember,
because he's got very very particular lip, hasn't he?
Yeah, shape. Yeah, so we tweaked that, and then we went to shoot with it, and it worked.
I'm glad you brought it with Colin and Jeffrey Epstein, because when I was watching, I was like, man, how do they find an actor who looks just like?
But somebody said that he's all CG, and it's like, no, he wasn't CG at all.
I think his girlfriend was really disappointed. I remember him telling me in the chair, he's like, my girlfriend is going to be absolutely destroyed. The fact that I look like Jeffrey Epstein, she'll never be able to get that out of her head.
Amazing. You mentioned this, like, about how, like, Rufus, and like we're saying, Rufus does not look like Prince Andrew. He's got, like, he looks like a classic movie star, right? Kind of like that kind of look. Is it harder, or is it maybe sometimes easier when the actor doesn't look like the person, like exactly like the person? Does it make your job so much harder, or is it like, oh, that gives me more room to play around and like make it work?
I think when somebody doesn't look anything like them, you've got harder work with the audience, because everyone knows what Rufus looks like. Everyone knows he's handsome and he's chiseled and he's a dashing Englishman, and then so we then have to make him into Prince Andrew, which is very, very different. And I think that's the fear. It's just the fear that everyone knows what he really looks like, and people will be like, oh, we could have easily mucked that up, and they could have, said, oh, they shouldn't have done it. They shouldn't have. And I think with an actor who looks closer, like that, it means that you have to put less on, and there is a potential that you don't need to use anything. You can just rely on the performance alone. But I think we really needed to. I mean, we couldn't have Rufus looking like Rufus as Prince Andrew, because everyone would like Prince Andrew all of a sudden.
Kirstin, you have, like, I guess you mentioned doing the hair and makeup on Gillian and Billy as well. I think they both look great, and I'm like, again, like, I with the wigs and everything, especially Gillian as Emily Maitlis. I think she just, it's like almost an uncanny match, I guess, which I guess she kind of looks like her in general, like we're just saying here. But what was that like, just in terms of like overall making sure their makeup is right? And I love Billy's makeup as Sam. I think it's so perfect for her character too, because it's so
when we met, I mean, Billy doesn't look anything like Sam, and when she came to us, she had black hair. So Billy had black hair, and she's got a much more olive, darker skin tone and bigger eyebrows, and wow. And Sam is so pale and so blonde. So we did quite a few tests to get exactly the right hair color, exactly right the blonde, make sure the wig is perfect, and then Billy's makeup was step by step. We did quite a few tests to get exactly the right base color, the lip line color, all the things that Sam uses daily. And Sam was very generous in just saying, this is what I use, this is what we do, da da da. And Billy, of course, all the actors were game in trying to get as close to their characters as possible. With Gillian, she's much paler, and it was very important to get the hair color right and the root, all the roots and everything exactly right, and her eye color. And we did about 5 different contact lens tests to try and get the exact brown that Emily has, and she's naturally a brunette, so everything had to be that little bit darker with Gillian. And it was trying to find out exactly what made Gillian look more like Emily. It was the shape of the way her hair was styled, the way that the hair was wrapped underneath. It was the color of the foundation, which was very different to Gillian's own skin tone. And then all the shading, it was very different to the way that Gillian would make herself up. And it was just certain things like dyeing her eyebrows darker, doing different shading around her face and contouring to just try and make things look as similar as possible. And then again, there was some angles where it's like, oh my God, she looks exactly the same. And there was sometimes that I think right at the very beginning, Netflix was like, where is Gillian? I can't see Gillian. She looks too much like Emily. You need to dial it back a bit. So we're like, okay, that's a strange request, So there's just few tweaks here and there just to sort of get enough of Gillian and enough of Emily without it being too perfect, because she was doing so many things to do with her performance that were pushing Emily's character. So you're just like, okay, we have to dial back a bit. And that was, that's all Philip, that's the direction that Philip wanted us to go. So it's not like exact looking like you. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, weirdly,
that's the normal request that you get with prosthetics, because you cover them up so much. It's like, we need to see a bit more of the actor. We need to see more of that hybrid. And so it's just kudos to Kirstin here that she managed to do that with straight makeup, and yet she gets asked to dial it down because we can't see the actress anymore.
It's amazing. Kudos to both of you, because like I said, I think the film is incredible, and the makeup and the work here is just really remarkable, and you can see it right on screen. I mean, like, it's right there. It just looks great.
And it's so close.
Yes, it is. Like Kristyan was saying, it's so close. There's a lot of close-ups. Kirstin Chalmers, hair and makeup designer and co-prosthetics designer for Scoop, and Kristyan Mallett, the prosthetics designer for Scoop. Thank you both so much for doing this. It's a great film. You can watch it on Netflix. Thank you both.
No problem.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.